All right, so back after this small break. Now it's time for one of the pack member that is part of it's the beginning of our pack. So Pack Scotland, Virtual Pack, Pack Chamonix, and now Pack to the Future. So it's Stijn. So Stijn, thanks again to be here. You always bring a relevant topic on the table. You've been. Do I need to introduce yourself? I don't know. I mean, people know you pretty well. So, but I will still do it because you never know who someone maybe has never heard about Stijn. If that's the case, I would recommend you follow Stijn on LinkedIn. He's pretty active and he is sharing his work. So we learn a lot from Stijn. So Stijn has 19 years of experience in all the different sectors as a performance test specialist. In fact, it's quite funny. So because Stijn is a spent a lot of in Australia, so that's where he met Stephen Thousand, that was here with us this morning. So he's a bit the mentor of Stephen. He learned, Stijn learned a lot of things from one of the great mentor in the performance world on the using of Tableau, and he shared that to Stephen. So that's why Stephen has a lot of reference about it. So Stijn is an enthusiast. He leader in a deep technical. He is. I think we can call him a raw data fanatic. I don't know if we can say that, but I will. But it's my private joke with Stijn. So Stijn, it's great to have you on board. So you've been discussing a lot about the importance of raw data in the past. At the Pack Chamonix. On here, I think it's another update on it. I'm pretty thrilled to hear more about what you have. What are the news that you have implemented within your new frame? Stijn, if you can start sharing your screen. You have now 45 minutes. I mean less, but I will. If you go further, this is just information. Go further than 45 minutes. Presentation, I will need to use this phone here to call, and probably one of our owner will call it to say stop Stijn because it's going beyond the limits again.
Oh, thanks. That's a bit of a challenge. I would love to see that phone ringing. So I'm going to talk for 50 minutes today. No, thank you. Did you get those poll questions ready? Because always in for to try something new.
So the poll questions, it's. I thought that I was going to ask. Wait to your session. You want us to start the polling now, or do you?
Yeah, just to see if everyone is. No, just start just to see that everyone is awake. If you get 3 answers, then I can stop and. No, just kick it off.
Okay, so let's start one of the poll and let's figure out. So before Stijn's presentation, let's do a small poll right now, and we have in fact 4 poll questions. So let's start the first one, and then after the Stijn's before the Q&A, we'll do the second one. All right. So the question is, how much experience do you have with performance testing? So the first answer is, what's performance testing? I love it, but limited experience. Want to learn more. Third option is, I've been doing performance testing for a while now, mainly focused on load test tools, best experience with tuning, optimization, and scaling. And last is, I'm a guru. I've been doing performance testing for many years, including tuning and optimization. I don't need to learn anything. I don't need to listen to your presentation. So I'm going to disconnect right away. All right, so let's wait few seconds more. So, okay. All right, let's stop it.
Interesting, isn't it?
Interesting. So the results is basically out of our, let's see how many people we have connected as of now. Because we have less people connected now than we had 2 hours ago. So it's less interesting. But out of this 32 36 person connected, we have 33% of gurus. My gosh, you know that there was so many gurus in the industry. The second is 35% is I'm doing performance testing for a while, mainly focused on load testing tools. And last is the just audits. So it's well balanced. It could be interesting to restart the poll, in fact. Stijn, you know that you're first.
Okay, it's up to me then. Okay, let's start sharing options. Share screen. Here we go from beginning. Henry, can you say if you see this? You should be seeing my presentation. There's always a little bit delay. No? Share screen. Entire screen. Start sharing.
Okay, now I see it. Perfect.
Okay, cool. So welcome. Thanks, Hendrik, because this is my fourth time, and the reason I'm involved is because I do love sharing. It's what I've been talking about earlier. If we don't share, we don't build up the knowledge. I don't think there is enough knowledge around performance engineering. So having a platform like this is just awesome. So big thank you to the team for setting this up. So Hendrik asked me if I had interest to join again. Of course I had. So I made up this beautiful title, Automatic Result Analyzes the Missing Link in Continuous Load Testing. But yeah, I didn't have any content at that time, so I didn't even know what I was going to talk about. And I built up my content over the last 2-3 days, being agile. And I like a little bit of stress to build up stuff. So unfortunately, I'm going to change my title. And it's now, why do we need an automated framework for load testing and how do we get started? So let's get started. Let me tell you a story. So I'm working at a specific client now for the last 3 years, and I'm mainly involved with one core application. And we've moved from waterfall into DevOps. And over the years, we improved performance quite significantly with 550%, less outages or no outages, no calls to the help center, better performance, better customer experience. So a beautiful story. But one day I came into the office in the morning and I was dragged into one of those war rooms. And another component that was actually interfaced with the component I was involved with was doing not so well in production. There were lots of outages. And of course, my application was not working either because it was interfaced to the other one. And the developers, they were just sitting at the same floor as I was sitting, the developers of that application that was not doing so well. So I spent a few weeks solving that issue together with a whole team of people, which we did, but it made me think and it made me also dream a little bit. We all have dreams. And it was only then when I thought about it, I was not doing a good job. I have people on the same floor developing stuff, but they didn't take any non-functional aspects into account. So I did not cover enough ground. So that was an issue. I actually wanted to do more. I wanted to actually make sure that more people knew about performance engineering, so that I wouldn't spend all the time in a war room discussing about the basics about performance engineering. So the only way to do that was by me doing less so I could do more. And that's why we started to dream about a framework. And we started to build an automatic framework. But before we started to build it, we needed to define clear goals. What did we want to achieve with this automatic framework? So the idea was, of course, to automate performance testing into the CI/CD pipeline. And it's quite a hot topic if you see all the topics of the last 10 hours. So it's all about automation and trying to actually put performance testing into a continuous integration pipeline. And when I say automate performance testing into, I don't mean only execution, because that's actually really easy. But we need to also take into the analytics, and based on the analytics, the decision taking. And for me, that's really key to an automated framework. If you don't do it, what's the point of automating performance testing? And what I wanted to achieve was, of course, to improve the quality and consistency of testing with the iterations and deployments into production becoming more frequently. Of course, we need to speed up testing. So that was another bonus. I wanted to decrease the cost, and I wanted to liberate the performance engineer from repetitive tasks. So we can actually do more by doing less. So I could also educate other teams about non-functional requirements or non-functional aspects, and help not only one core team, but different teams in building decent software. So the next step was, okay, if we are going to build that automatic framework, how are we going to build it? What are the requirements for this automatic framework? This is for me extremely important. Make it as simple as possible. I have worked with a lot of clever people, people that are way more clever than I am. But sometimes these people are so clever that they build complex solutions because they love complexity. And I really wanted to avoid building complex software to actually a complex framework to solve complex issues. I want a simple solution. So don't over-engineer, keep focused. What do I want to solve? And my prime measurement of my framework would be response time. And in the previous talks, there were talks about artificial intelligence and machine learning, and they were mainly based on resource utilization. And for me, resource utilization is actually secondary to response times and user experience. Which is really important. It's also what application performance management tools say. First, look at the performance of your business application. Secondary, look at the statistics of your hardware. Here you go. We all knew that word was going to pop up. Raw data. Henrik calls me Mr. Raw Data. I actually don't like that, but that's fine. I don't think it's cool, but it's maybe a good way to emphasize the importance of raw data. So Mr. Raw Data is going to explain about raw data. So raw data is every single measurement of the response time of a request that you send to your application. And I'm a believer that we need as much information, as much data points as possible, so that we can take wise decisions. Don't reinvent the wheel. There are many wheels around. So why don't we use a wheel that already exists if you want to extend your framework? I'm not going to build another APM solution. I don't want that. So use APM solutions if you can. Use other add-ons or whatever. So don't develop because you can. Just use what's there. It's also linked to as simple as possible. And then, of course, always very important if you make an automatic framework is that you want this thing to be configurable, customizable, and scalable. You don't want this thing to work for one transaction. You want to work for more than one transaction, for more than one type of application. You want it to be configurable, customizable, and scalable. So after that, we had defined the goals and the requirements, the next phase. So solve complex problems in a simple way. Yes. So then we started actually developing. But before going there, this is the slide that I always show, and I'm sure that Henrik has seen this one many times, probably at least 4 times, 3 times at the Performance Advisory Council and 1 time at Whopper. So this is a test that we did at a current client. We ran a test for load test for 2000 seconds. That's the x-axis. And at the y-axis, you have the response times of, and you probably have seen those graphs too many times. But then I want you to show you the next one. And that's actually the same test, the same data, but you see the raw data. And I think this one is very, very powerful. If you're new to raw data and you have used load test tools to analyze your results with, please make sure that there is a possibility to look at the raw data. I always say, and I said it before as well, in one of the previous presentations, the raw data shows the ugliness of an application. And as a performance engineer, we need to see the ugliness so that we can judge if we are going to solve that ugliness. And that's also important. Listen what I say. I say judge to make sure to analyze if you're going to solve. It doesn't mean that all ugliness needs to be resolved because there is a price against that. But at least you need to see it to make a judgment call. So don't work with trend lines, averages, aggregation. If you can, please move to the scatter graph, to this graph. That's enough about raw data now. So before that you start actually building your automatic framework, there is no point building any automation framework if you can't do it manually. It's very simple. If you're not doing load testing in a manual way, why would you try to actually jump on that DevOps or release train and do everything automatic because that's the way it should be done? No. Take up that old telephone and do it in a manual way. Don't try to use the newest technologies. Just first start with the basics. So create a standard load test. Execute the test in a non-GUI command line mode. There was a previous talk where they spoke about integrations with Jenkins. Of course, there, if you automate, you need to run in a non-GUI way. And in the appendix of this presentation, you will see how to do that for JMeter, LoadRunner, and Neoload. But when you use the tool, please look at how to do that, because if you not be able to run a test without non-GUI, there is no way you will be automating. And then, of course, whenever you're able to build a non-GUI load test, you can actually easily trigger it. You can schedule and trigger it in an automated way. So that's part 1 done. We just achieved to automate the execution of a load test. Very easy. But then the second part is, of course, how can we get that data? How can we analyze the data? And if we export the data, please be careful with your automatic framework as well when you start doing the analytics. The date time format is always very important, can be tricky when you program a framework. And be also careful when you run into automatic tests, what you do with your test data. When you run a test with transactions that are mutating, that are changing the data, of course, you need to have a strategy how to deal with that data. And I'm unbelievable happy and lucky, more lucky than happy, that at the current client, 99% of all transactions in production are very heavy calculation transactions and read-only transactions, which makes my life less complex, which I actually really like. Currently, we are using Neoload, but it can be done on any tool. This is how you launch a Neoload test in a no GUI way. So you specify the executable, your Neoloid project, the load test that you want to run with the amount of users and duration and transactions. You say now GUI, and then yes, there it is. You're going to export the raw data. So you execute that test and you will see the raw data appearing. And then would it not be really useful if you could take that raw data and put it in a central repository? So say that you run every day one regression test. So after a year, you have 365 results sitting in that central repository, which means that you easily, if you have good analytics, you will be easily be able to compare 1 run, 2 run, 3 runs, 6 runs, 20 runs. And I must say, if you look at the load test tool, and I've said that also quite a lot of times, software providers that create load test tools, they are doing a really, really, really good job in creating a tool that puts load on a system. That's why we call it the load test tool, I guess. But unfortunately, I don't believe that many tools have awesome analytics. We have been using a Tableau, which is a BI tool, for many years, but the BI tool, of course, has been developed to analyze data. And if you use a load test tool to put load on the system together with a decent BI tool, your analytics will be better. And I always say that the value of load testing is not in the creating of test scripts and creating a load scenario. It's actually the execution and analytics that matter, because based on analytics, we will make decisions on what's going to happen. And therefore, using BI tools is for me a real good way of looking in a better way to the results of your load tests. So if you hook up a BI tool, you can actually do and start doing smart analytics. And that was a little bit the idea when we created our robotic analytical framework. We've talked about it in the previous presentations. We started, I have even the main developer sitting in the same room. If I get difficult questions he doesn't know yet, then he can answer those. But we started to develop this in January this year, and I'm actually very much surprised how much you can do. When you, I always say, one of my LinkedIn posts, I mentioned something when you add a very good Python developer together with a senior performance engineer that actually knows what performance testing is about, you can actually do miracles when you develop an automatic framework. It's just getting those requirements and your goals of your framework defined in a clever way, and then transfer that knowledge to a young chap that's really good into Python, and then you can actually do miracles. And I think that we actually did a miracle here, because I'm really, really proud of what we have achieved in just a few months. So we are using Neoloid. The only reason is it's a good tool, but also the current client is using this. So we do this on a use case basis. So with Jenkins or any other DevOps orchestration tool or whatever you call it, we will kick off the test in a no GUI way. Neoloid will export the raw data into a file share or framework, listening to the file share, takes up the data, puts it into the central repository, and the framework will also add some custom data to it, the run ID, to identify the specific run, but also the version of the software you're testing it. And then we have the analytical engine that kicks in based on the type of test that we are executing. Say that we are doing a regression test that will look at a specific validation suite with validation rules. And based on that validation rules, it will calculate a test execution score. So the validation rules are based on the raw data. Remember the previous slides. I do want us to do the analytics in a clever way. I don't want to take a decision based on trend lines. I don't want to take a decision of my build is good or bad based on one single measurement of an average. like some of the other tools are doing now. I do want, if I take a decision, it needs to be a clever decision, otherwise I don't take a decision. So it's actually using that raw data or the raw data. It uses the throughput, the error rate, and also the average global response time. And based on all of that, it will come up with a single point, a test execution score. And with that test execution score, we will pass or fail a build. And then our framework will go up into a kind of a cleaning cycle to keep it lean and scalable. So when I spoke about the analytics, this is actually the fountain that you can see in Wellington, where I lived for many years. It's a bucket fountain that you can see in Cuba Street, one of the popular streets in Wellington. Going back in my time when I was working there. So buckets. So when we started with my dream in January, what I was thinking about, how can I do some smart analytics? And the first thing, my goal or my idea was to actually look at image recognition. When you do two tests and you want to compare them, put those two images on top of each other and see what the difference is. And based on the difference of image recognition, come up with a kind of a score. That was my idea. So we started to work with that idea, but it was actually a big failure. Because if you do a test, so you take a picture of a test and another picture, those tests will be never the same. So we always had 100% failure. So that did not work, but at least we tried. So that was fail fast and learn from it. So that's what we did. So we fell actually back on basic mathematics. So on the percentiles that you all know if you're a performance tester. So we have defined many percentiles, and based on, so the green line is the baseline. You see two benchmark tests, and you actually see that there is a difference in performance between both, between the three runs. The blue one is actually the one that's the worst. The baseline was okay, and the benchmark 2 is the best. And we are actually using in a certain way the percentiles and the difference, the deviation between the benchmark test and the baseline test. And based on all those calculations, we will come up with a test execution score. So how we use it at the current client, every night we do have a build, and then we actually we run a test against that latest code release. And this is actually a dashboard that we have created in Tableau. We are also looking to use Grafana. We're already using Grafana, but we don't get the same insights as we do with Tableau for the moment. What you see here is what I always wanted to see since I started with performance testing. And actually, I need to update my LinkedIn profile. It's nearly 20 years, getting older every day. But anyway, look at this. For me, it still makes me enthusiastic. I've looked at this for many times, and what you see here is you see different run IDs. So that are actually executions that happen overnight, automatic. We call it a peak load test, so it's a peak load on the system. And it's a test execution score that actually tells us if the run was successful or not. So we have a threshold defined, and that's configurable on 80. Everything above 80 is passed, everything under 80 is failed. And that the thresholds actually that's specific to the application and the requirements of that application and the KPIs of that application, how you define it. And with run ID 6, you see that the test execution score is 100, but it's not green, it's orange. Not that I'm working now in the Netherlands, that's orange. Now it's just because we want to make sure that this run is not passed, it's actually under review. And the reason why the framework puts this under review is that the error rate increased. So at the right-hand side, you see that the rough error count, that the error count went up from 71 to 196. So for that build, there was a functional error that slipped into the code that actually meant that we had an error rate increase that was too significant to pass the build. It does mean though that the performance is similar than the previous run, which is your baseline. Then run ID 7, the functional defect was actually solved, and then run ID 8, we do see that we have that ugly red color and a test execution score of 64. So this actually means that the performance has degraded quite a bit, and you can see that also from the trend line at the right-hand side. But what I love at this specific dashboard is also that you see the raw data. So all those little dots, that's the raw data. Every color is a different type of transaction. And you can see from the percentiles that are visualized that everything is a little bit higher than the previous runs. And that actually meant that we came up with that the framework comes up with a test execution score that's lower. You see also the throughput at the right-hand side, and then that I love that graph with the percentile measurement because it visualizes the performance of your run so beautifully well. So this is the prime dashboard. We have also a secondary dashboard, which I call the transactional heat map. So also on transactional level, our framework is looking at the test execution score, you can say, on that level. And what you can see here, every horizontal line, I have removed the name of the transactions, but every horizontal line is actually the name of a transaction. So you have many transactions, and you see also at the vertical line, that's every line is a run ID, is an execution, an overnight automatic execution. And you can see indeed with run ID 8 that you had many transactions with a color that is orange, red, pink. So this means indeed that there was lots of functionality impacted by that code release in a negative way. But what you can see here as well is that you have, when you look in a horizontal way at those transactions, if you have a lot of color deviation between different run IDs, it means that that functionality, that the performance is fluctuating also quite a bit, and that you might have to look into that functionality. So it gives you a little bit more of a deeper insight. So for me, this is what I always, this was my dream, to see that view. So when we come in the morning, even if we don't automatically pause or fail a build, my test has been done. I see the results straight away. It's always the same test, the same time, been done. There is consistency, and being able to see this straight away has already been such a value for me. And to be able to actually select which runs you want to do. I can see 10 runs, I can see 2 runs, I can compare, I can customize those graphs in the way that I want, has been very powerful for me. So now I think that I'm the first one to actually really give a physical demo. So if this one explodes and doesn't work, excuse me, but that's what demos do. So I'm going to press the escape button. And let's try something out here. So this is my demo. This is my file share. What else do I have? This is my workbench for MySQL. It's not too important. So I'm going to kick off a no GUI test with Neoload, which is going to happen right now. So it's leasing a license, and it's going to kick off a test. The test will run for 1 hour, so I'm not going to meet my deadline. Actually, it's just a demo, so the export of the raw data will happen. You can see that normally in the shared folder, that whenever the test is finalized, you can see the raw data, and Rav is listening and is taking up that data, is chunking that data into the database. And now it looks at the validation suite for that demo, and it will start calculating, do all the magic of the analytics, the smart analytics, and look at all the percentiles and all the differences of the measurements. So if we go into Tableau now, so this is Tableau, and this was the state of my run just before that I executed that test that I just showed to you. So I can actually just push on F5, and it should update my dashboard. And there you see that we have another run, run ID 7 that was added to my data set. and 73 is the test execution score because the response times is a little bit higher. And for me, this is you see that also from the trend line over here. So it's so cool. I hope you guys find this cool as well. I need to go back to this was a demo that actually succeeded, so I'm really happy. So you see here also the business transaction scores, which I explained to you. So you see here run ID 2 has been compared with run ID 1 and has a score of. So it's actually really, really cool. So I can go give you a little bit of a demo here. I can go to specific dashboard and I can say, okay, I don't want to compare all these runs. I just want to compare those few runs, and you only have those. And then you can even say, okay, I don't want to see these transactions, and you exclude them. So it's by using the BI tooling and the raw data, it enables you to do and look into problems way easier and focus and measure things in a different way. So just as a side demo to the automatic framework. So going back to my demo and back to my from current kick off that. So we finished demo. Yay, that's good. So the first time that I was talking to the guys of Neotys of the Performance Advisory Council in Scotland when we were drinking awesome whiskey in a beautiful castle. It's really cool if you go to one of those physical performance advisory councils because they are organized in stunning places. And we were sitting in that castle and I was talking about performance testing in a DevOps world, don't spin in the middle. And it's still one of my favorite talks, which I actually did last week for the Eurostar conference. And I talk about how DevOps has changed the world of a performance engineer. And I believe that lots of people in our profession are focusing on that shift left. We need to shift left, and we need to have developers writing unit tests, using profilers, it says all the features. Yes, we do need to do all of that stuff, but we do need to have a lot of emphasis as well on shifting right. Shifting right into production. And I'm actually a very big believer that we should shift way more right and do less testing. And I believe that we have done too many tests. And at the current client, we are still sitting on bare metal. So we are not doing elastic scaling up, scaling down. But I believe that there are many organizations that are not so advanced and that they are not the Facebooks and the Googles, so that they are still in data centers and being able to manage their own resources. So here we see that the application here you see the CPU utilization of that application. Is actually true for many applications. They are not being used 24/7. And they are being used and there are patterns. There are daily patterns, weekly patterns, there are monthly patterns, seasonal patterns. And quite often the CPU is just sitting there, the memory is just sitting there, it's like an empty room. It's like you have a house and everyone goes to work and the whole house is empty for the most of the day. So there is no point, no one is utilizing it. So if no one is utilizing it, why are we not using it for load testing? And I'm actually really, really happy that we build up a trust with the client that we are now load testing into production. So we are every morning at 7 o'clock, we are doing a peak load test live in production. And we are doing that in an automatic way so that we can see those graphs with RAF every morning, which will provide me with 365 snapshots together with the version of that software every day live from production. Because there is only one production system, and that's your production system. Because I'm sure that there are still many people on this call that are still struggling with the test environment, like we do as well. We never have exactly the same performance of my test environment than I have in production. So how are you going to make the correct decisions if you're only testing in test environments? You can't. So looking at the next slide, here we see the runs that we have been doing in production, and you do see some stability there. And you see, this is for me so wonderful. I can actually, every morning at 7 o'clock, I can see what the performance is. If you have done a code release, I can see what the impact was live from my statistics that I gather with the framework. So, thinking, should I play a song? just to wait till the phone will ring. Probably not, hey. Anyway, let's close this off. Performance test automation is more than just automating test execution. That's the easy part. We need to have smart analytics, and based on that analytics, be able to pass or fail a build or to take decisions. It's not just about test execution. Start small. Don't try to achieve everything at once because you will fail. With moving into DevOps, you can build during iterations your own frameworks and improve them while you go. Don't try to aim for everything because you will not succeed. Simple is good. Don't overcomplexify. Use what you have. Integrate with APM tooling or other tooling. They're awesome. So use what you have. That's what we have done with the framework as well. Don't limit your solution to trend analysis and averages. Use raw data. Use it again. Use Python as your Swiss Army knife. And also the previous presentations, lots of people are talking about Python and frameworks. So I think that we all agree that that's the framework that a tester and a performance tester should learn. It's a language that we all should learn because it's so easy and it provides you with so many possibilities. And then looking at the future of all of this, I think indeed, and we had talks about it, and it will happen. Artificial intelligence is what we are looking at. I don't want to measure what the performance is doing. I want to know what the performance will be doing. So that's a bit of a different intake. I want to be proactive, and that's not finding issues when they occur. That's preventing issues to occur. And then let me close off with this one sentence because I think this is quite powerful. I posted on LinkedIn the other day when I was preparing for this presentation. Don't aim to develop a perfect framework. Understand the imperfections so you can make smart conclusions and add value quickly, progress fast and cost effectively in an iterative way. I've seen too many people aiming for perfection and never getting anywhere. I don't believe in perfection. Imperfect can be good as long as you understand what's imperfect. So based on what's imperfect, you can still make decisions. If you do want to know more, I wrote a little bit of a LinkedIn post on LinkedIn. About our robotic analytical framework, which we have designed in our Accenture Innovation Center in the Netherlands. You can also look at the blog post that I wrote for the folks of Neotys for the second virtual advisory council, where I speak about testing is not an average game. Or just connect on LinkedIn, or maybe you can even ask questions right now, so it's question time, I call it.
Awesome. So I'm so disappointed. I was hoping that someone could call my phone here, and I didn't have the opportunity. So I'm so disappointed that you respected the timeline.
Yeah, me too. But we haven't finished with the poll yet, so we can have the other poll questions and then let you ring.
So I will have first maybe one question before we do. And then we could start doing the poll questions afterward. I'm just enabling all the webcams straight away. Everyone that are currently connected. There is many people connected.
I see we have.
Off.
Cool.
All right. So do you have any? Go. Yes. Okay. Assuming Stijn is not respecting the time. Okay. Yeah, I will tell you straight away. Okay. Thank you. Bye. So yeah. So Stijn seems that there's something that is wrong here. No. So it was just to introduce the poll question. A small joke. I also wanted to have this phone ringing. So it took me almost 11 hours to make it ring. So I'm pretty proud of me to wait 11 hours to ring in the phone. So before we move to the Q&A, small poll questions. If you want to ask a question, you can use the chat function. If you want to ask a question, you can use the chat function. So before we move to the Q&A, small poll questions. So before we move to the Q&A, small poll questions. And then we will continue the Q&A of Stijn's presentation. So the poll up, stop the poll. Okay, the poll. The question is that the project I'm involved with are being delivered with waterfall delivery model, with agile delivery model. So I'll leave you 1 minute and 30 seconds, and then we will basically take the Q&A session. All right, 30 minutes, 30 seconds more.
This is a surprise to me, Henrik.
Yeah, me too. At the moment, we have only 14 people that has voted, so it's,
People don't find the poll.
or maybe because a lot of people has been connected since this morning, so I see some of the people here connected. They have been very very brave because connected since this morning. I'm very honored about those. Oh. All right, let's close the poll. So, yeah, I was a bit more surprised. I thought that a bit more people will be working on waterfalls. It's pretty surprising. So, because I think there's let's see, two models going on at the moment, a mix of agile plus waterfalls. It's pretty good, pretty surprising.
I think we're doing both, Henrik. So I ticked agile because we're doing more agile, but we do both.
You do both? Yeah, so I mean, a lot of projects, depending on the technology, you do, it pretty depends.
Yeah.
So I had one question for you, Stijn, because I looked at the presentation. I know the topic already, and I remember last May in Marseille, you were mentioning that probably on the next version you will probably try to remove Tableau to basically have your framework working with that Tableau. Did you have the chance to implement that? So that's my first question.
Yeah.
And the second question.
Yeah. Okay.
Please go ahead.
So, yeah, I was actually really pleased with Grafana, to be honest, and the simplicity of using Grafana. And we have been using it because we're using it as well. So with the framework, you define a test case, and for some we just have synthetic monitoring running, and then we still use RAF not to do the analytics, but more to put all the data into a MySQL database and have it all sitting centralized. So we have the raw data permanently there, and we have hooked up Grafana to the RAF database for synthetic monitoring, which is awesome. It was really simple to do. Because we do have licenses with Tableau, and I really love my Tableau dashboards. I haven't spent a lot of time just to replace the whole thing with Grafana. I'm sure that's possible, and really Grafana is an awesome tool to use, and I would really encourage people to do so if you don't want to spend any licensing costs. But I do love my Tableau.
Yeah. This morning, Shivali Aparna made a presentation saying you can presenting a solution called RStudio, which is there's an enterprise version, but there's also an open source version. You can combine different modules, and one of the modules that she presented was Plotly. So I thought that combining RStudio plus Plotly, you can almost, not fully replace Tableau, but at least partially. I think from the dashboard perspective that we are building after our load test, I think RStudio can be a really good candidate. From what I saw this morning, I thought it was pretty awesome. So did you never thought about utilizing RStudio instead of Tableau?
No, we haven't. Also because, I mean, we are doing this on a use case basis, so it's not that we are developing a commercial tool set or framework. So for us, it's not a goal to actually create something that is extendable to all freeware. That's not the real aim of it. It's providing the best value to our clients.
All right. Rob, since so you were eager to listen to Stijn sessions to implement it directly on your pipeline. So, do you have any questions for Stijn? You're muted, Stijn. Stijn? No, you're Rob. Rob, let me check.
There we
You're
go.
muted. Okay.
As you know, I'm a big fan of raw data myself, so I really like Stijn's talk. One thing I'd like to know is, has it ever missed an issue, Stijn? Is there a certain set of conditions where it won't pick something up and you've seen issues in production, or does it capture most things?
It's a good question, because of course it is a framework, and what we do is we use it for another client, and that's where we actually saw that we didn't cover everything, because one of the things that we didn't really include was if the performance of one transaction would significantly increase. So we had one specific transaction that was really low in load, but increased to 3,000 seconds. And of course, you didn't want to pass that, but our framework didn't capture it. So that's when we changed the framework to actually also take that into account. So I think it's a little bit of learning from what you see to improve what you do. And of course, I would really encourage people, if you use it in an automatic way, to still look at those dashboards, or test in production on a daily basis, what we do. So then we can see in the morning as well what has happened, and if we then see inconsistency between the results of the framework and what and what happens in production, then we can actually look at the specifics and improve what we do. So we should be using the framework at way more clients so we can improve what we are doing. And therefore, one of the things that we are playing with, but I need time, it's all about time. And how many hours do we have in a day? So we are looking maybe to put it on the open source market, and that would actually enable people to start helping us out with what we are doing. And that will make you smile as well, Rob, because then we can work better together.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Yeah, so you know all of the calculations and things you do as part of that, are they on your links that you put up in the presentation, are they, Stijn?
Yeah, I'm not going into detail there because I'm a little bit I can't put all the code yet online. That will be part of our open source project, so I need to be a bit reluctant there for the moment.
Yeah, okay.
Christoph, do you have any questions for Stijn? I mean, I guess from a Dynatrace perspective, it seems that Stijn is rebuilding what you achieved with Dynatrace, almost.
Right. No, well, I didn't see the whole presentation, to be honest, but the part I saw. So Dynatrace focuses on production monitoring only, right? So we're not the load test driver in that sense. Dynatrace currently focuses purely on production, and we do percentiles there too and response times, and we try to be very smart to detect for the user when a problem has occurred. So we much rather have the approach that we don't want to give the user too much data. We just rather want to give him the answer right away. Like, is there a problem or not? We detect it for you. And we're usually thinking big environments, like thousands of microservices working together, where it's impossible to, or hard to look at the raw data and check everything there.
Jurek? So, Jurek, yeah. I don't know, I guess Stijn, you recognize Jurek? Jurek was with us in Scotland.
Ja, ik denk dat we Nederlands kunnen spreken, niet?
Let's do that. Do you hear me?
Yeah, a bit.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. That was a good dry run for me now.
Yeah, it is.
But
do you have any,
I have a question for
questions for
Stijn.
Stijn?
Actually, yeah, good talk. Thanks for that. You already cut some grass in front of my feet for my presentation. So thank you for that. But I like the idea of scoring actually the performance test and based on the score continue or not continue. But I still didn't quite get it how you actually got to a score and how did you determine that 80 would be a good score to proceed?
So it's a good question. I can't go into all details there, but so basically it's the bucket sizes. I wanted to go as close as possible to the raw data. And if you see a run, you have 100 percentiles. You can have 100 buckets. And in the buckets, you can measure the deviation between two runs. And if you all use that data to calculate the score, you can come up with something. Yeah, so it's a deviation on percentiles together with some weighting factor that we use to in a quite smart way to come up with that score. The 80%, I see that the same what our friends of Dynatrace are doing, or AppDynamics, or any APM tool. When you actually deploy it in production and you have never used it, your APM solution needs in a way to learn about the application. You can't put any health rules in place if you don't know how the application performs. And that's actually totally the same with what we have done. So you need to, what I would say, if you use RAF for the first time, let it run. No code releases, let it just run for a week, every hour, every 2 hours, and see what the data is and how the framework reacts. And based on all the data that you have, then you start putting your thresholds in place, and you're going to configure it. That's actually the same what Christoph will do with this Dynatrace in production. So it's the Dynatrace need to learn about applications before that you put health rules in place.
Yeah. So it's still a manual action to set the thresholds.
Yeah, of course it is for every application. So that's the setup of the framework at a different client. And that's the same for any APM solution in that way.
And did you encounter many false positives and negatives along the way?
So since we are running, like I showed you the one that we have from production, it's actually quite limited. And what we try, the client, we are actually a little bit advanced in what the client can offer us. So I speak about a little bit CI/CD, but for the moment we are just scheduling and executing. I would like to pause and fail a build, but the client is not yet there. There's a little bit, yeah, we can do it, and based on what we have seen in a manual way, without actually pausing or failing the build based on the test execution score, I would actually not have any problem doing that right now. No.
Cool.
But what I see, what I see, and it's still happening everywhere, and I'm still surprised about it. With automatic testing, you can actually execute the same test at the same moment, every day. And still, I see quite a lot of fluctuations that are not application related. And then it becomes quite tricky because you actually don't want to fail or pause a build because something else happened, which is not related to what you have done. And having a framework like this to actually visualize to a client problems that are not related to the code, but to other stuff that no one knows about has been very powerful. I hope that you know what I mean. You do every day, you run the same test against the same code base in an automatic way, and you have a RAF that has been linked to your execution. So what you expect in an idle world is a score of 100, 100, 100, 100, 100. But yeah, if that a score fluctuates all the time because your infrastructure is so bad, it actually tells you that you might not be able to load test and performance test at your current client because of constraints that they haven't seen before.
Yeah, but many things change outside of the pipeline too. Maybe people sneaking in some stuff, changing.
Yeah, there can be, but you need to know about that because otherwise you will run a load test, you take a decision because it's bad, but nothing to do with the code release. So even visualizing this has been very powerful for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the Tableau visualization. All the tests next to each other. It's something very hard to get, by the way.
Before it's 5 p.m., so before we jump to Christophe